Something of a Seiko extravaganza today as I took a look at...
Hang on a minute, darling. Those Seikos aren't too bad at all.
To try and understand why my next Grail watch could possibly be one of their divers.
Might be just the ticket for my next yachting holiday off the coast of Monte Carlo.
So what's in today's lineup? Well, first we have the Prospex SPB297, which is part of the Save the Ocean trilogy, aka the 1965 diver recreation with that magnificent or magnifico aqua blue dial, and this came out in 2022. Secondly, we have another Save the Ocean, this time the SPB299, a modern reinterpretation of the 1968 diver, which is also from 2022. But this one has a stunning baby blue ice dial and is a special edition. Then last, but maybe not least, we have a 2021 Captain Willard, the SPB183 limited edition, in a more subdued blue. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. As always, we'll start with a wristwatch check. I'm wearing the Dan Henry 1975. It's got a little bit to do with this video. I'll explain why later. If you missed the review, do check it out. Quite a controversial review. Still debating if I'm going to pull the trigger, but yeah, loving this watch. But anyway, we're talking about Seiko. Here we have three Seikos that I'm considering in my search for my next Grail watch. Decided it's got to be a Seiko diver. So let's get to know the three options we have before us. When briefly summed up, especially to those not really into Seiko, they might appear, at first at least, to be a bit all samey. After all, they are all ISO 200 meter rated, all in a super hard coated steel, with a Kanagawa wave on the screwbacks, sapphire glass, as well as being automatic divers, and each one with a classic diver style applied marker layout with the date at 3. Their 60-minute bezels are also pretty much the same too, aside from slight differentiation in numeral thickness and use of color. Even the handsets are pretty similar. On top of that, despite the original Willard being first released in 1970, they are all deeply inspired by heavyweight influential Seikos from the genesis of their dive watches, the 1960s. But to us watch obsessives, there's far more to it than the basic overall similarities and simple variations of the use of blue. In fact, the wearing experience and how they make me feel is incredibly and dramatically different from watch to watch. So let's start off with discussing the 1965, let me get this right, recreation. And I noticed on the website the 68 is referred to as a reinterpretation. I mean, it's all, what's the difference, right? I mean, it's all marketing, reimagination, revival, what's a good one? Rejuvenation, there we go. And for the Seiko haters, regurgitation, maybe? No, too harsh. Seiko started late compared to the Swiss big boys when it came to making its first diver with the 62 mass in 1965. While originally something more of a skin diver with its 150 meter depth rating and case style, its design language was conformist, to say the least, fashioned to the already well-established design elements set by the pioneers of the diving watch genre over a decade before. We are of course talking primarily about Blancpain, Rolex, Omega, Squale, Zodiac, and so on. In fact, take the name off the dial, squint your eyes a little bit and give it a quick glance from afar, it could have been easily made by any dive watch maker of that time. Seiko obviously played it safe, as you should first time around. Launching a watch, especially in a new genre for any brand, for the first time, is no small feat. If you imagine, it costs well into even 6 figures of investment with a micro-brand level launch, and I speak from experience here. But imagine doing it all in-house and on an international scale. The odds were certainly stacked against them, but of course, by the 1970s, Seiko were indeed killing it, and we'll discuss why in just a moment. So I'm no stranger to the 1965. When the first one came out, I can't remember when it was, I reviewed one 3 or 4 years ago. It lacked that pizzazz, the ineffable charm that the SKX has. It had its own imperfections, but not lovable imperfections like the SKX that I was so used to, that we're all so used to. This new range, especially in 2022, of ice-inspired dials, inspired by nature, they definitely took a leaf out of Grand Seiko's book, as you've seen from my previous reviews. It's a common theme in Japanese art, and it's crept into their watchmaking, which was a logical evolution. They always feature nature as the overarching, the bigger force or the bigger subject in their traditional wood prints and stuff. I collect a lot of Japanese art, and this is a tradition that is centuries old. Now, obviously, Hiroshige and Hokusei are a bit out my budget, but I own some turn of the century pieces, and even more recently, I went to see a Kusama exhibition at the New York Botanical Gardens. There again, nature featuring heavily, the primary subject. So it was a logical thing, I think, for their watches. Hello, is that Seiko? Yes, I would like one of those dive watches, please. Any chance of a discount? I'm a famous movie star, you see. Jurassic Park? Hugo Mountbatten's the name. What do you mean you haven't heard of it? Okay, I'm buddies with that chap TGV. Oh, splendid. Let me give you my black card information. So what about the 1968 reinterpretation, or rebirth? No wait, rebound. Or how about revenge? No, that's too aggressive. Return. Re-up. No, wait, that's a drug term. Reinvention. Yeah, no, I've said that. Did I say that? That's too bold of a statement anyway. Revamp. No. Resurrection. No, wait, that's a film. Resurgence. No, that definitely sounds like a movie. Well, you know what I mean. The SPB299 is emblematic of Seiko's start during the late 1960s to move in a more daring direction. Unlike the conventional screw-down crown at 3 on the 1965, here we see them with a less obtrusive 4 o'clock crown, a feature first pioneered by Charles von Buren in the early 1960s. Seiko cleverly combined this with a super-wide beveled edge that guides the finger along when winding or setting the time. It's not just there for pretty looks. Although Seiko did do a good job here, it will never compare to the far superior case design of the early 1960s Capo Lavoro Squale 1521 and its modern descendant. Nonetheless, it has the most presence of the three and commands attention, even if it is a little bit too top-heavy for my liking. It's during this era that we also saw the introduction of more experimental dial features, case shapes, and to the hands of the watch as well. You might notice the traffic light tip to the seconds on the 1968 and the Willard, or the improved differentiation in marker styles like the Transformer-esque logo at the 12, further boosting the effectiveness and orientation of the now outstanding Lumibright we get in these modern divers. Absolutely fantastic in low light and obviously diving situations. So lastly, we have the Willard here, which I've done a complete 180-degree turn on. It's one of those watches. Oh, and by the way, I've put it on a Wrist Candy Watch Club Tropic Star strap, an ode to Apocalypse Now. Of course, it's only natural. It just doesn't belong on a bracelet to me. I mean, as you guys can tell, I'm a cinema freak. It's one of those watches, a bit like the Mission Impossible Casio or the Rolex Explorer or even the Cartier Santos, that I dismissed it for either being too weird or too unusual or too boring, or I just didn't get. Tried it in the flesh. I borrowed the green Willard, which is that very unusual olive kind of military green, which I absolutely adored. And I do not like green watches, happiness aside. But yeah, I totally get it now. And it proves the point. You've got to try watches on in the flesh. I see this all the time on YouTube, people reviewing watches from pictures. That is not a real review. You cannot pass judgment on a watch until you've tried it. And some watches, they even require several weeks for you to understand and really kind of fall in love with. The 55th anniversary limited edition, or reincarnation of the Willard from 2021, colours aside, it's extremely faithful to the 1970 original, which was very ahead of its time with the rambunctious, exaggerated cushion case. It's designed so it does not snag on any diving gear by having no harsh angles, representing the core of Seiko's ideology and pragmatic approach to watch design. And if we put it into context, this would peak in the later 1970s and 80s. Just look at what followed: the saturation of diving capabilities of the tuna can cases, or the sci-fi futuristic world-changing first ani-digi diver, the Ani. And then there were even outlandish asymmetrical collabs with the world's premier car designer, Giorgetto Giugiaro, at one point. Or how about the brutalist machismo of the Seiko Monster? But this was all to come afterwards, especially as the Swiss subsequently buckled under the pressure of the quartz crisis, further clearing the path for former underdog Seiko and allow it to rise in becoming a horological superpower with the ability to take even more risks with their watches.
You should not drink and bake.
Sausage? Sausage!
So let's talk about the negatives. Well, I'm not a fan of any of the bracelets to these watches. The finishing is fine, they do the job, but you got pin and collar links there. When considering you got brands like Laurier for half the price doing really amazing screwed link bracelets with solid end links. Well, these have solid end links. Don't get me started on the diver extension. I've never liked them on Seikos. They seem to be an afterthought. Just wish Seiko would make more of an effort here. Powering all three watches is the same 6R35 that debuted in 2020, which is the successor to the 6R15. The main difference being the now astoundingly useful extra 20 hours of power reserve, giving you a whopping grand total of 70 hours. With my Rolex Explorer off to the watchmaker for a service, in recent years I've really come to appreciate the affordability and ease that comes with maintaining ETAs, Seiko calibers, Miyotas, and even various quartz. I'm actually dreading the final cost of that service, so there's definitely something to be said about the rock-solid reliability and longevity of the lower beat rate, which is at 21,600 vibrations an hour, meaning far less friction occurring on all the contact surfaces and components over its lifetime. Also now, with that boosted power reserve, it naturally translates to a fun Monday to Friday watch. When taken off on Friday night for something a little bit different for the weekend, come Monday morning, it's still going. And it goes without saying, we get hacking, bidirectional winding via that magic lever system, quick set, manual wind, and all the rest of it. We are a long way off the old days of the rudimentary 7S26, but then again, so is the now much higher price. And to think, there's going to be a whole new generation of watch enthusiasts, probably watching now, that have never done the Seiko shuffle with the old 7S26. If you're new into watches, you won't know what that means. Shout out to all my OGs, original Gentry that did the Seiko shuffle. Talking of movements, a lot of you are going to get your knickers in a twist because it does state, and I'll read it to you here, -15 plus 25 seconds out of the factory in normal temperature conditions. Now, in all honesty, I've never experienced accuracy that bad with these Seikos, with the newer Seikos. From 2019 to 2022, we saw the reorganization of Seiko, and as a result, pretty much like everything in life, the Prospects line has seen an elevation in prices, putting these bad boys into the, quote marks, mid-tier category, with the revamped Seiko 5 now dominating the entry level. Truthfully, I cannot stand this bourgeois obsession of putting watches into tiers. That's more of a watch dealer thing, as value is everything to them, and they view watches as a tradable commodity. Not like us watch enthusiasts, who typically put things like enjoyment, design, history, function, or whatever floats your boat first. I can't remember who said that fantastic quote. I suspect it might be Oscar Wilde. They know the cost of everything but the value of nothing. Personally, I think the cost is justified here. Let's not forget, these are entirely in-house made. And I'm talking everything, from the balance spring to the glass to, well, just everything in between. Few, if any, of these stiff competition can brag this. Having said that, you will have to come to terms with your own fears and desires when deciding to pull the trigger, especially considering what you can get for around the same, or even a lot less, with the likes of Glycine, Squale, Doxa, Zodiac, Yema, Longines, Dan Henry, and so on. So let's talk bezels. Well, we've got 3 different materials here as far as I can tell. The 65 has a really nice brushed steel with engraved numerals painted in there. The Willard, this is from a year before in 2021, so we got an aluminium insert. And then we have for the 68, I'm pretty sure I think it's a sapphire glass. I cannot be sure. It does not state on the website. Guys, if you know, please do share down below. In terms of how they perform, well, the colors are all very different. I think the brushed steel personally is my favorite, but the action is, well, the same. Oh, just listen to that. Yeah, it's the same all round. 120 click, unidirectional, very solidly done, nice and responsive, not too much wiggle, but the Willard definitely wins in terms of performance. Just the way that case glides your fingers instantly, ergonomically, to the coin edge. Genius, absolutely genius.
Oh look, wristwatch check. Cocktail time, I think. Absolutely spiffy.
As for the QC issues that Seiko has been so synonymous with, well, I didn't find any misalignments here, no inconsistency in quality or performance for that matter. But then again, I borrowed this from Moya Fine Jewelers, who are extremely fastidious and very professional Seiko authorized dealers. It's not the same as some grey market huckster, and this is why I always advise that it pays to go with someone trustworthy. That's always going to be there for you, and ultimately that's why I'm a returning customer of theirs. Hence the old adage, you buy the seller. So in conclusion, will I pull the trigger on any of these as my next Seiko diver? Well, not just yet. The Willard certainly came very close. I love that gilt seconds hand that complements the matching print on the dial and the understated use of dark royal, almost space blue. It's details like this that made me want to look at this particular variation. And it also does not suffer from the imbalanced, strange additional marker at the periphery like the new 2022 Save the Ocean Seikos do. Once seen, it's very difficult to unsee.
The 68 has this kind of metallic teal quality that changes in different lights. It may be a little bit too glossy for me, actually. I think it detracts from the main star of attraction, which should be the dial. I mean, I think that's why the brushed works best. But again, it's funny how it always comes down to colors, doesn't it? It's like, you know, we harp on about the design and the history and the price and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, well, do you like the color? Yeah. Madness, 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 madness.
While the 297 was great on the wrist, wearing very much like a vintage sub, the more boisterous SPB299 just didn't fit my modest 6.5-inch wrist. In my opinion, the crown also juts out far too much. It's a bit of a shame, as it really undermines the whole point of it being there in the first place. It actually makes me appreciate the Willard and my 1521 watches more. So that one is definitely for the larger wrist.
So I'm not going to pull the trigger here, but it has confirmed one thing, that my next Seiko dive watch will be a Captain Willard. Which dial, which color, who knows? Maybe I need to revisit the olive one. But this has reaffirmed my love for this watch. I mean, it's just so unusual. If you recall my Laurier review of the Falcon 3, I talked about the Batman silhouette aspect of watch design. The silhouette of this, it's like a Santos or I don't know, what else is really iconic from afar that you instantly, Royal Oak, you know, the outline of this, you instantly know it's a Willard. What else can it be? You know, that's when you know you have a strong design, a strong character, its own identity. You know, to me, it encapsulates everything that I love about Seiko. So, yeah, this definitely confirms my love for the Willard.
The way the Willard, at that staggering almost 43mm in diameter, but wears like a 40 because of that incredibly comfy case, is a testament to the genius of its design. And it goes without saying, I love the movie connection that's given it its name. There is an inherent warm, fuzzy feeling of nostalgia that the others lack.
The same feeling I get when I catch myself inexplicably stalking shockingly dated Scion PDAs from the 90s on eBay. I still can't explain why I'm so obsessed with that, but anyway. Ultimately, I would have loved to have the panache of the dial texture of the SPB297, but in the Willard for extra luster. I think that would have really pushed me to pull the trigger. There is, of course, the SPB301 Willard, released in the Saved Oceans trio this year, but that ice white and blue bezel was simply not my cup of tea. But personal collecting goals aside, these watches unequivocally encapsulate Seiko's logical balance of continuing honouring their rich legacy of traditional and iconic Seiko divers, but now finally with a little bit more personality. So my search for the ultimate Seiko diver continues. I was expecting a kind of Goldilocks scenario, one too hot, one too cold, one just right, but alas that did not happen. At least now I know it's going to be a Willard, but which one? Anyway, guys, let me know your nominations, any divers I should check out from Seiko that I haven't already. Especially let me know your thoughts on these three divers. What do you think they got right? What do you think they got wrong? I love hearing your feedback. Oh, and most importantly of all, please don't forget to like this video, especially if you want to support more free and independent content like this. It's the best way to support the channel. Right, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Onwards and upwards. Ciao.